Long ago, nestled in the forgotten corner of a nameless town, there stood a small, weather-worn shop. The shop was known to some, though few had ever dared venture near it. The name of the store, the Abyssal Shop, had spread like a chilling rumor, whispered through the streets. No one could quite remember how the shop first appeared, nor who owned it, but its presence was undeniable. It was said that its doors never truly closed and its windows, though dust-covered, somehow glowed faintly at night, casting an eerie light onto the cobbled streets. At first glance, the Abyssal Shop seemed to be an ordinary antique store. Its shelves were lined with curiosities, odd trinkets, old books, and strange items that should have been relegated to the annals of forgotten history. There were tarnished relics from forgotten wars, arcane artifacts sealed in dusty glass cases, and oddities that defied logic or reason. But those who ventured too close felt a strange sensation, a sense of dread, as if something dark and powerful watched them. The shop's true nature remained hidden from those who only visited it by chance. But there was one man who had come to claim it, a man whose name had long been forgotten by time, Morvok, the keeper of the abyss. He was not human, not anymore. Morvok had been transformed, his soul bound to the cursed shop, a servant of a power that was older than the town itself. Morvok's arrival in the shop was a quiet one, almost imperceptible to the people of the town. The day he stepped across the threshold, the shop seemed to change. The air grew colder. The very walls of the shop seemed to groan in greeting, as if welcoming its new master. The lights, once flickering with the dim glow of candles and gas lamps, began to pulse erratically, casting strange shadows across the room. Those who wandered too close to the store would notice the flickers, then feel the weight of a presence that pressed down on them from the inside. Though he was not yet seen by most, rumors of Morvok's arrival began to spread. They spoke of him in hushed tones. Some said he was a ghost, others claimed he was a demon, a creature of unimaginable power, cursed to haunt the town for eternity. But no one knew the truth. No one except those few who dared step into the shop. As the days passed, the store's grip on the town tightened. People began to notice that they had lost track of time when passing by the Abyssal Shop. It wasn't uncommon for visitors to enter, only to find that hours, or even days, had passed without them realizing it. Some who entered never came out at all. It wasn't just the shop itself that held power over the town, it was the keeper who dwelled within. Morvok was a creature of imposing stature, towering over even the tallest of men. His skin was dark, almost black, like the night sky, and his eyes glowed with an unnatural crimson light. From his skull curved two massive horns, jagged and sharp, curling back like the twisted branches of some ancient, monstrous tree. He wore no clothes, only the tattered remnants of what once might have been robes. His entire being radiated an otherworldly energy, an aura of malevolent power that made even the bravest souls quake in terror. Morvok's true nature was a mystery. Some believed that he had once been human, but had made a terrible pact with a being far older and more terrifying than any mortal could imagine. In exchange for power beyond measure, he had forsaken his humanity, becoming a monster trapped in the body of a creature that defied logic. The rumors surrounding the Abyssal Shop were not without cause. The shop itself had become a place of fear. Those who dared enter found themselves drawn to the strange artifacts within. Some came seeking knowledge, others came seeking treasures beyond imagination, and some simply sought to explore the dark mysteries of the shop. But all who entered were met with the same fate. The flickering lights within the shop were not mere accidents. They were the first sign of Morvok's presence. He could control them with a mere thought, twisting the light around him until it danced like a living thing. The lights flickered and dimmed at his will, creating an unsettling atmosphere. The shadows lengthened, growing darker and deeper as if they too were under his control. Each time a visitor stepped into the shop, the lights would flicker, casting quick glimpses of Morvok's form before plunging the shop into darkness once again. In the darkness, Morvok would appear. He was never seen in full by his victims, but his presence could be felt, a cold breath on the back of their necks, the sound of something scraping against the floor. His enormous horns would scrape against the walls, an unmistakable sound that would send chills through the hearts of anyone who dared to listen. There was no escape from the shop once Morvok had decided to claim you. The doors, once wide and welcoming, would slam shut with a deafening noise, trapping the victim inside. The flickering lights would cease, leaving only the dark, oppressive silence of the shop to envelop them. And then, Morvok would make his move. No one knew for sure what happened to those who entered the shop and never returned. Some said that Morvok tore them apart with his monstrous strength, others claimed that he consumed their very souls, their screams fading into the dark corners of the shop. But one thing was clear, the Abyssal Shop had become a place of terror, ruled by the horned keeper who delighted in the fear of those foolish enough to enter. The town, once full of life, began to wither. People spoke of the shop in fearful whispers, warning travelers to stay far away. But for all their warnings, the lure of the shop remained strong. People still came, driven by greed, curiosity, or desperation, and one by one, they vanished into the shop, never to be seen again. Morvok's reign over the town had only just begun. The town had begun to change in subtle, unnerving ways. Where once laughter and conversation filled the streets, now only silence reigned. The townspeople no longer gathered in the square to speak of old times or celebrate the passing of the seasons. Instead, they kept to themselves, eyes nervously darting towards the looming figure of the Abyssal Shop. Even those who had once walked past it without a second thought now avoided the street entirely, crossing to the other side with a hurried, fearful glance. Still, despite the growing dread that gripped the town, there were always those who, for reasons unknown, would venture toward the cursed store. It wasn't that they didn't hear the rumors, or that they didn't believe the stories, their motives were far darker than that. They were driven by something deeper, an insatiable curiosity, or perhaps a desire for forbidden power. One such man was Julian Carter. He had heard the whispers of the Abyssal Shop, had heard of its cursed keeper and the people who had vanished within its walls. But Julian wasn't one to be frightened by stories. He was a scholar, a man of reason, and he believed the town's fears were born from superstition. He could not fathom that something so absurd as a monster could be real. Julian had heard of the shop's contents, ancient texts, rare artifacts, and relics from a time long forgotten. He had studied the occult for years, and to him, the shop was a treasure trove of knowledge that could further his research. The thought of uncovering its secrets was far too tempting to resist. On a damp and foggy evening, Julian found himself standing before the shop's door. His heart raced, but his mind was firm. The building loomed over him, its windows dark, and yet there was an undeniable pull, a sense that something inside was watching him, waiting. The door creaked as Julian pushed it open, the sound echoing in the silence. A cold draft greeted him, and as he stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind him with a deafening noise. The sudden darkness made him hesitate for only a moment, before the faint flicker of light above the shelves illuminated the room. The shop was exactly as he had imagined. Shelves crammed with ancient books, strange trinkets, and objects that seemed to hum with a power that made his skin prickle. A musty, oppressive air filled his lungs, and he coughed as he moved deeper inside. Despite the growing discomfort, Julian couldn't shake the feeling that he was being drawn in, that someone, was waiting for him to make the next move. "Hello," Julian called out, his voice trembling slightly as he scanned the room. "Is anyone here?" His words hung in the air, unanswered. The silence that followed was unnerving, but he pressed on, stepping between shelves filled with relics of an unknown past. His fingers brushed against one of the books, and he paused. The title was written in a language he couldn't understand, but he recognized the eerie sigil embossed on the cover. It was an ancient symbol, one he had studied in his research. The room around him seemed to grow colder, the temperature dropping with each passing second. Julian tried to ignore the creeping sense of unease that had settled into his chest. He had come for knowledge, and that was what he would find. As he moved deeper into the shop, the lights flickered. It was subtle at first, just a brief dimming, but then they flickered again. And again. Each time, the darkness that filled the gaps between the lights felt thicker, like it was pushing closer, wrapping around him. A sharp, scraping sound echoed from somewhere in the depths of the shop, like claws dragging across the floor. Julian froze. He had heard that sound before, in stories. In whispers about the Abyssal Shop. But now, hearing it in person, it felt different. It was no longer just a rumor, it was real. And it was coming for him. His heart raced as he turned toward the sound. The air seemed to grow heavier, suffocating him as he waited for something, anything, to happen. The lights flickered once more, and this time, when they illuminated the room again, a figure stood before him. Julian stumbled back, his breath catching in his throat. The figure was tall, unnaturally tall, with glowing red eyes that burned through the dim light. His skin was dark, like the void of night, and from his head curled two massive horns that twisted back like the branches of a dead tree. A dark aura of power surrounded him, and Julian could feel its weight pressing down on him. The figure did not speak. He simply stood there, watching with a cold, unwavering gaze. Julian's legs trembled beneath him, but his mind screamed at him to act, to fight back, or at the very least, to escape. He reached for the door, but when he turned, it was no longer there. Instead, the walls had shifted. The shop had changed, as if it were alive, rearranging itself to trap him inside. He was surrounded by shelves, by artifacts, by books, trapped in a maze of the shop's own making. A low, rumbling growl emanated from the figure before him. The lights flickered again, casting a brief flash of illumination that showed Morvok's monstrous form in full. The sheer size of the creature was incomprehensible. His muscles rippled beneath his dark skin, and his horns scraped against the shelves as he moved closer. "You should not have come here," a voice, low and guttural, whispered from the darkness. Julian's heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to speak. "Who are you?" Morvok's eyes glowed brighter, and he stepped forward, his heavy footsteps causing the ground to tremble beneath Julian's feet. "I am the keeper of the abyss," he intoned, his voice sending a chill through Julian's bones. "I guard what should not be seen, and I collect what does not belong." Suddenly, the lights flickered wildly, casting shadows that twisted and writhed across the walls. The shop seemed to close in around Julian, its walls growing tighter, suffocating him. "You entered seeking knowledge," Morvok continued, his voice now dripping with a dark amusement. "But knowledge has a price. A price you will now pay." The light flickered once more, and in that moment, Julian saw something that made his blood run cold, a shadow, looming behind Morvok. It was huge, monstrous, and it moved with an unnatural speed. Before Julian could react, the shadow lunged at him, its claws raking across his chest. He screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the darkness. Morvok watched with cold, crimson eyes as Julian crumpled to the floor. The keeper did not need to act. The shop itself had claimed its next victim. The lights flickered again, and all that remained was the faint echo of the shop's twisted heartbeat, and just like that, another soul had been lost to the Abyssal Shop. As the days passed, the town seemed to grow smaller, more isolated. The whispers about the Abyssal Shop became less frequent, as though the very mention of it could draw the darkness closer. The streets that once teemed with life were now mostly empty. Only a few brave souls or reckless wanderers dared approach the cursed shop, but no one ever returned. The town had become a shadow of its former self, and the people, once full of hope, were now mere ghosts, haunted by the ever-present fear of what lay beyond the shop's doors. It was as if the town was slowly suffocating, slowly falling under the oppressive weight of Morvok's curse. Yet the keeper of the Abyssal Shop remained unchanged. Morvok had become a legend, a myth that haunted the memories of those who had once called the town home. He was no longer just a monster, he was an embodiment of darkness itself. Over time, he had become an entity that people spoke of in hushed tones, but none dared speak his name aloud. Those who had once sought knowledge, wealth, or power within the walls of the Abyssal Shop had all been consumed by Morvok. They became part of the darkness that lingered within the shop's twisted labyrinth. The lights continued to flicker, a sickly glow that danced with malice in the dim air, and the shadows stretched long, feeding on the fear of anyone foolish enough to enter. But now, something had changed. A new presence had arrived, a stranger, who had wandered too far into the forgotten corners of the world, hoping to escape the shackles of his past. His name was Elias Griffin. A man with a history of making mistakes, of seeking redemption where there was none to be found. Elias had heard the rumors of the Abyssal Shop, had heard the warnings, but unlike the others, he was not deterred by superstition. He had seen too much darkness in his own life to be frightened by tales of cursed stores and vengeful monsters. Elias wasn't looking for treasure or knowledge. He was looking for something else, something that he could never quite put into words. Perhaps a way to forget, or perhaps a way to find peace. But as he stood before the shop, his heart heavy with doubt, he wondered if he was simply running from his own demons. It was said that the shop granted wishes, but at a cost. It was said that the keeper could offer power beyond imagination, but it would come at the price of the soul. The door creaked open, as if inviting him in, and Elias stepped across the threshold. He was immediately struck by the coldness that seemed to seep from every corner of the shop. The flickering lights did nothing to banish the darkness that clung to the walls, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. He moved forward, his boots creaking against the worn floorboards. The shelves were filled with forgotten relics, strange items that glimmered in the half-light. But there was something different about this time, something in the atmosphere that felt more suffocating, more oppressive. Then, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the distance. Elias froze. It was not the sound of his own movement. It was something larger. Something more powerful. Before he could react, the lights flickered again, and in that moment, the figure appeared. Morvok stood before him, his towering form casting a long shadow. His red eyes gleamed with an unsettling light, and the air around him seemed to vibrate with dark energy. His horns, twisted and jagged, scraped the ceiling as he moved closer, his steps slow and deliberate. Elias's heart raced, but he stood his ground. The keeper's presence was overwhelming, but he did not flinch. "You are different," Morvok's voice rumbled, low and foreboding. "You are not here for what others seek." Elias's voice was steady as he answered, "I'm not here for power. I'm not here for riches. I want something else." Morvok studied him for a moment, his eyes narrowing. "And what would that be?" "I want to leave," Elias said, his voice barely a whisper, though it felt as though his words hung in the air like the weight of 1,000 souls. "I want to leave this place, this town. I want to escape the past that haunts me. I want peace." The keeper's laugh was low, cruel, and filled with darkness. "There is no peace in the Abyssal Shop, mortal. There is only what I choose to give, and nothing more." Elias swallowed hard. He had expected this, but the truth of it was harder to bear than he had anticipated. "Then what is it you want?" he asked, his voice strained. Morvok stepped closer, towering over him. His presence filled the room, and Elias could feel his power pressing down on him like a physical force. "I want your soul," the keeper said, his voice echoing in the shop's hollow walls. "I have claimed the souls of many, but yours will be different. You seek escape, but I can offer you none. The price for that escape is your soul, and once it is mine, there is no return." The lights flickered again, casting brief glimpses of Morvok's twisted face, half shadow, half light, as he leaned in close to Elias. "There is no redemption here, no way out. You will remain with me forever, a part of the darkness that consumes this place." Elias's knees trembled, but he did not break. He had come this far, and he knew that turning back would mean facing the same demons he had fled from. "What if I don't want to make that deal?" he asked, his voice shaky but defiant. Morvok's eyes flared with an intense crimson light, and he smiled, his teeth sharp and glistening. "Then you will become like the others, lost, consumed, a part of the shop's endless curse. You will never leave." For a moment, Elias felt the weight of his decision pressing down on him, a crushing force that threatened to crush him beneath it. But then, something within him stirred. He had spent so long running, hiding from his past, from his mistakes. But this was his chance to face it. To find a way out without sacrificing everything. "I won't be your prisoner," Elias said, his voice low but filled with determination. For a brief second, the shop seemed to tremble. The lights flickered wildly, casting strange, dancing shadows across the room. Morvok's smile faltered, and his eyes flashed with fury. "You think you can escape?" Morvok growled. "You cannot escape what you are. You are already mine." But Elias's heart remained firm. "I am not yours to take." In that moment, the shop's grip on him weakened. The lights flickered once more, brighter and faster than ever before, until they exploded in a blinding flash. When the light faded, Morvok was gone. The shop had returned to its still, oppressive silence. Elias stood alone in the center of the shop, his heart pounding, but for the first time in years, he felt something other than fear. He had resisted the pull of the darkness, and in doing so, he had taken the first step toward freedom. The Abyssal Shop would remain, its curse unbroken, its keeper waiting for the next soul to enter. But Elias had escaped. The shop could not claim him, not this time. As he turned to leave, the door creaked open, and for the first time in ages, a soft breeze filled the room. Elias stepped into the light, leaving the cursed shop behind. The town would continue to whisper of the Abyssal Shop, of the keeper who had ruled it for centuries. But Elias, for the first time in his life, was free.